A scorching afternoon at Engels Air Base, where the shimmering heat waves rising from the concrete runway create a surreal mirage around the world's most formidable strategic bomber, the Tu-95 Bear. This 150-ton relic of the Cold War sits under the unforgiving sun, its 8 massive counter-rotating propellers reflecting the blinding light like silver discs of destruction. To the Russian High Command, this is an untouchable fortress, protected by a billion-dollar umbrella of S-400 missiles and Pantsir S-1 cannons that scan the bright blue sky for any sign of intrusion. But as the clock strikes 2 p.m., a terrifying transformation is about to occur, turning this icon of nuclear deterrence into a useless, stationary pile of scrap metal. How did a collection of plastic, consumer-grade batteries, and ingenious Ukrainian engineering bypass the world's most sophisticated air defenses in broad daylight? Today, we aren't looking for a massive explosion or a Hollywood fireball. We are analyzing the mission kill, a surgical strike so precise and so humiliating that it proves the era of the giant bomber may finally be over. To grasp the magnitude of this tactical earthquake, one must first respect the target, the Tupolev Tu-95, an aircraft so loud it can be heard by submarine sonar, and so powerful it remains the only propeller-driven bomber still in frontline service. With a wingspan of 50 meters and 4 Kuznetsov NK-12 engines, the most powerful turboprops ever built, the Bear is Russia's primary platform for launching Kh-101 cruise missiles from the safety of the deep rear. It represents the nuclear triad, a symbol of a superpower that can strike any corner of the globe without ever leaving its own airspace. For 70 years, the doctrine was simple. Keep these giants hundreds of miles away from the front line, and they are invincible. However, in the age of asymmetric warfare, that 80-meter frame isn't just a symbol of power. It is the largest, most visible target on the planet, a Goliath waiting for a David who doesn't need a sling, just a stable internet connection and a drone. Engels Air Base is not just a parking lot for planes. It is a fortress woven with layers of steel and silicon, designed to dominate the electromagnetic spectrum. Under the bright afternoon sun, the S-400 Triumph systems rotate their massive radars, capable of tracking 300 targets simultaneously from 400 kilometers away, while the Pantsir S-1 units stand guard with their 30mm rapid-fire cannons tuned to swat down anything larger than a pigeon. Russia's daylight defense relies on a combination of radar and high-resolution optical sensors, believing that anything approaching in the clear blue sky would be vaporized long before it reached the perimeter. This digital wall also includes the Krasuka 4 electronic warfare station, which blankets the area in a chaotic soup of radio interference designed to sever the link between any drone and its operator. It is a system built to fight a 20th century war against jets and missiles, but it is fundamentally blind to the micro-threats that are currently crawling through the grass just beyond the fence. The Russian defenders believe that broad daylight is their greatest ally, as it allows their TV-guided seekers and human observers to identify threats with perfect clarity, but Ukraine's engineers have turned this light into a weapon of deception. While radar can be fooled by stealth coatings, optical sensors are fooled by clutter, the visual noise created by the shimmering heat, the shadows of the hangars, and the sheer movement of a busy airbase during a working day. Ukraine realized that a drone doesn't need to be invisible. It just needs to look like something that doesn't matter, like a bird, a piece of wind-blown debris, or a common delivery truck moving along the base's perimeter. By attacking at midday, Ukraine exploited the cognitive overload of the Russian operators, who are trained to look for high-speed blips on a screen rather than a slow-moving shape lost in the glare of the afternoon sun. This was not a failure of technology, but a failure of imagination, the belief that a threat must be loud and fast to be dangerous. At exactly 1:15 p.m., the first move of the Sky Light operation begins, though ironically, It takes place under a cloudless sky, the launch of the UJ-26 Bober, or Beaver. The Bober is a long-range kamikaze drone with a unique canard design. Its small wings are at the front, making it highly maneuverable and difficult for traditional radars to categorize. Cruising at an altitude of 1,000 meters, the Bober's gasoline engine produces a distinct, moped-like hum that is intentionally loud enough to trigger the base's acoustic sensors and alert the local population. This is the bait. The goal of these drones is not to strike the Tu-95 seconds directly, but to force the Russian air defense crews to go active, to turn on every radar, reveal their exact GPS coordinates, and exhaust their ready-to-fire missiles on a target that costs less than a used car. As the Bobers approach Engels, they become the center of a chaotic, million-dollar fireworks display in the midday sky. As the Bober drones drone closer to the Engels perimeter, the sound of their engines creates a psychological pressure cooker for the Russian soldiers on the ground, who know that these machines have previously reached as far as Moscow. Even in the bright light of day, the sight of a slow-moving drone causes more panic than a supersonic missile because it represents a threat that is seen but cannot be easily stopped by conventional means. The Pantsir S-1 crews, desperate to prove their effectiveness, begin a frantic engagement, dumping thousands of rounds of 30mm tungsten ammunition and launching 57 E-6 interceptor missiles into the air. Each missile launch costs the Kremlin upwards of $100,000, while the Bober costs a fraction of that, creating a suicidal math where the defender loses money every time they successfully win an engagement. By the time the three Bobers are shot down, the Russian base is in a state of high-alert euphoria, believing they have neutralized the threat, completely unaware that the real killers are already beneath them. Inside the Russian command center at Engels, the radar screens finally clear as the last Bober is vaporized, leading the officers to believe they have successfully defended their prize assets under the most difficult daylight conditions. This is the success trap, the moment of psychological relaxation that occurs after a period of intense combat stress, where the human brain naturally seeks a reprieve and lowers its guard. The air defense systems now begin their cool-down phase. Radars are throttled back to save power, and crews take a moment to report their victories up the chain of command to Moscow. They believe the Ukrainian attack was a failure of primitive technology against Russian might, but in reality, they have just provided the perfect cover for the second, silent phase of the operation. The bright sun continues to beat down on the runway, and to the exhausted guards, the airfield looks exactly as it did an hour ago, quiet, hot, and secure, which is precisely the illusion Ukraine worked so hard to create. While the Russian military was focused on the sky, a new breed of predator was already moving through the drainage ditches and tall weeds surrounding the Engels perimeter. The Ukrainian Ground Drone. These are low-profile, electric-drive unmanned ground vehicles, UGVs, that look more like high-tech skateboards than weapons of war, designed to sit just inches off the ground to avoid detection by any radar tuned to look for aircraft. These drones are covered in advanced multispectral camouflage netting that breaks up their silhouette against the dry grass and dirt, making them virtually invisible even to a guard standing only 20 meters away. Moving at a walking pace to minimize dust and vibration, these ground drones have spent hours maneuvering into position, utilizing the dead zones in the base's security cameras that were never designed to monitor the weeds. These UGVs are not the killers themselves. They are the motherships, carrying the final lethal payload that will execute the mission kill. The genius of using ground drones in broad daylight lies in the concept of visual clutter, where the natural environment provides more cover than the darkness of night ever could. In the midday heat, the air near the ground is turbulent and distorted, creating heat shimmer that masks the subtle movements of a small, camo-covered object crawling through the brush. Russian security protocols are built around the threat of the fence, the idea that an infiltrator must be a human being who can be seen by a thermal camera or a motion sensor. However, the electric motors of the Ukrainian UGVs produce almost zero heat, and move with such a steady, mechanical rhythm that they are often filtered out by automated security software as wind-blown vegetation. By the time the ground drone reaches its final waypoint, just 200 meters from a parked Tu-95, it has bypassed $1 billion of air defense without a single alarm being triggered, proving that in the 21st century, the most dangerous weapon is the one you refuse to see. Sitting stationary in a patch of scrubland, the ground drone activates its primary function, acting as a local signal hub for the strike team located hundreds of miles away in Kiev. To defeat Russia's massive electronic warfare EW jamming, which can cut off GPS and radio links for miles, Ukraine uses a short-range, high-bandwidth relay system. The ground drone connects to a secure Starlink satellite terminal hidden under its casing, then rebroadcast that signal over a very low-power, directional radio beam that only travels a few hundred meters directly to the FPV drone it carries. This creates a protected pocket of communication that is too small for the Russian EW stations to detect or jam, as their sensors are looking for powerful signals coming from the sky or the horizon. The operator in Kiev now has a crystal-clear, lag-free video feed from the center of Russia's most sensitive airbase, seeing the bare bomber through the eyes of a ghost that is already inside the house. The ground drone, now acting as a launch pad, releases its passenger, a customized 7-inch FPV kamikaze drone known as the Scalpel. Under the bright sun, the Scalpel lifts off from the grass, but it doesn't climb. It stays exactly 1 meter above the ground, weaving through the landing gear of fuel trucks and the shadows of the massive aircraft hangars. In the midday bustle of the base, with trucks moving and technicians walking between buildings, the tiny drone is just another moving object in a sea of activity. The operator uses the shadow hopping technique, moving from one dark area to the next to avoid the direct glare of the sun on the drone's optics, ensuring a perfect view of the target. As it approaches the target Tu-95, the drone passes within meters of a Russian guard who is busy checking his phone, unaware that the end of his career is flying past his boots at 40 miles per hour. At 5:12 p.m., the sun is beginning to tilt, casting long, dramatic shadows across the Engels runway as the FPV Scalpel begins its final attack run. The operator pushes the throttle to 100%, and the drone's high-pitched whine is instantly drowned out by the ambient noise of the base's generators and the distant roar of a departing transport plane. This is the inertia phase. The drone is moving so fast and is so small that even if a guard saw it now, there would be no time to react, no time to raise a rifle, and no way for a Pantsir cannon to track it. The operator isn't aiming for the fuselage or the cockpit. Those are armored and too large to ensure a total loss of the aircraft with a small charge. Instead, the Scalpel is programmed for a surgical strike on the most vulnerable, unshielded, and irreplaceable part of the Tu-95. The complex hub of the counter-rotating propellers on the No. 2 engine. The Tu-95's Kuznetsov NK-12 engines are a marvel of 1,950 seconds engineering, utilizing a massive gearbox to spin 2 sets of 4-bladed propellers in opposite directions at supersonic speeds. This system is the aircraft's greatest strength and its most fatal Achilles heel, as the gearbox is a highly complex, precision-machined component that cannot be armored without adding thousands of pounds of weight. If a small, high-velocity explosion occurs at the base of this hub, it doesn't just damage the blades, it shatters the internal planetary gears and severs the main drive shaft. For Ukraine, this is the golden ratio of warfare, a $500 drone destroying a component that takes 6 months to manufacture and requires a specialized factory that may no longer exist in full capacity. As the FPV drone's camera fills with the image of the silver propeller hub, the operator knows that a single gram of molten copper in the right place is worth more than a ton of TNT in the wrong one. Under the brilliant afternoon sky, the FPV drone impacts the propeller hub with a sharp, metallic clack that is surprisingly quiet compared to the massive explosions typically seen on the news. The drone carries a 1.5 kilogram tandem-shaped charge, designed specifically to penetrate the thick steel of an engine casing and inject a jet of molten copper at 22,000 miles per hour into the heart of the gearbox. There is no giant fireball, no soaring column of black smoke, and no secondary explosions that would alert the entire base immediately. Instead, there is a localized burst of energy that vaporizes the precision gears and welds the drive shaft to the engine block in a fraction of a second. The drone vanishes, leaving behind nothing but a scorched 5-inch hole in the engine cowling and a bear that will never fly again. To a casual observer 100 meters away, the plane looks untouched, but internally, the heart of the bomber has been ripped out. For the first few minutes after the strike, nothing happens. And that is the most brilliant part of the Ukrainian strategy. Because there was no massive explosion, the automated fire suppression systems aren't triggered, and the digital wall continues to report that everything is secure. It is only when a ground crew technician walks by the number 2 engine to begin a routine pre-flight check that the mission kill is discovered. He sees the small, blackened hole, the smell of burnt electronics, and the puddle of hydraulic fluid leaking onto the pristine concrete. The alarm is finally raised, but it is a soft alarm, a confused series of radio calls trying to figure out what happened, rather than a combat alert. The Russian commanders are baffled. Their radars showed nothing. Their EW was active, and their guards saw no one. Yet one of their most precious strategic assets is now a total loss. You might wonder why Ukraine didn't use a larger drone to blow the entire Tu-95 to pieces, but the mission kill is a far more sophisticated and damaging tool of war. A burnt-out wreck is a clear-cut loss that can be cleared away, but a crippled aircraft is a lingering logistical nightmare that stays on the base, tying up resources, technicians, and hangar space for months. It creates a zombie asset on paper. Russia still has a certain number of bombers, but in reality, their operational capacity is shrinking with every minor strike. Furthermore, by leaving the fuselage intact, Ukraine forces Russia to investigate every square inch of the base, searching for ghosts and planting seeds of deep-seated distrust among the ranks. Was it a drone? Was it a saboteur? Was it a mechanical failure? This uncertainty is a force multiplier that causes more damage than any bomb ever could. The brutal math of the Engels strike is what truly keeps the Kremlin's accountants awake at night, as it represents a return on investment, ROI, that is almost unprecedented in the history of warfare. Ukraine's total expenditure for this mission, the Bober decoys, the ground drone, and the FPV Scalpel, amounts to roughly $60,000, while a single Tu-95 milliseconds is valued at approximately $30 million. Using a simple formula, we can see the devastating asymmetry, resulting in a value-to-cost ratio of 500 to 1. But the true cost to Russia is even higher, as they must now spend hundreds of millions of dollars to upgrade the physical security of every base, relocate their entire fleet deeper into the Arctic, and increase the number of air defense units protecting safe areas. Ukraine is not just destroying planes, they are bankrupting the Russian military's ability to defend its own territory. The strike at Engels marks the official end of the safe rear doctrine, a concept that has governed military thinking since the dawn of the 20th century. For 100 years, the further back you were from the front line, the safer you were. This was the fundamental promise made to the pilots of strategic bombers and the commanders of logistics hubs. But when a $500 drone can reach 600 miles into your territory and execute a surgical strike in broad daylight, that promise is officially broken. Russia is now faced with a strategic catch-22. If they keep their bombers at Engels, they will continue to be picked apart one by one. If they move them to the Arctic, they increase the flight time and maintenance wear, making their missile strikes less frequent and more predictable. The bear is no longer a predator. It is a sitting duck in a world where the pond is filled with invisible piranhas. Military analysts from Washington to Beijing are currently rewriting their playbooks based on the lessons learned from the Ghost in the Hangar. This operation has proven that the traditional pillars of air, power, stealth, speed, and size are being challenged by the new pillars of 21st century warfare: mass, autonomy, and low cost. We are entering the age of the swarm, where a single, multi-billion-dollar aircraft carrier or strategic bomber can be neutralized by 1,000 disposable drones that cost less than the paint on the target. This isn't just a win for Ukraine. It is a warning to every superpower that believes their expensive toys make them invincible. The bear was silenced not by a louder roar, but by a quiet, persistent hum that proved that in the modern world, innovation and courage are the ultimate weapons. So, after seeing how a $30 million strategic icon was paralyzed by a handful of plastic drones in broad daylight, we have a question for the tactical minds in our audience. If you were the Russian commander at Engels Air Base tomorrow morning, what would be your first move to stop the ghosts in the grass? Would you cut down every blade of grass for miles and build a concrete wall? Or would you realize that the sky is no longer yours to control and move your entire fleet to the North Pole? Or, from the Ukrainian perspective, if you were the commander in Kyiv, would you keep targeting individual bombers, or would you use this ground-to-air tactic to strike the fuel pipelines and command bunkers next? Let us know your strategic choice in the comments below. Do you think the age of the giant bomber is officially dead? Or is there still a way to protect these legends from the silent swarm? Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more deep dives into the technology changing the face of modern war. Well, bye for now.